Hello, welcome to Light from Above. My name is David Kenney. I'm the preacher for the church in Wadsworth, Ohio. Today I'm interviewing students from the West Virginia School of Preaching. The West Virginia School of Preaching is located in Moundsville, West Virginia. The director is Andy Robison. I'll give you the website and you can take a look at that and see about the information about the school. Today we're talking to Collin Matheny. Collin, welcome to the program. Glad you could be with us.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here with you.
Collin's getting ready to graduate pretty soon, probably not soon enough for him, but June 12th, 2020. So
Yes,
it's coming up.
Lord willing.
Yeah, very good. Collin, why don't we start out, we both have some commonalities. One of them is both of our fathers are preachers.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about your parents?
Well, my parents met, it's been almost 30 years ago now. My dad was doing mission work in India at the time, and my mom was working with a couple different colleges, and they met and did some work over in India. They kept going back and forth to India for about 8 years actually, and then when they decided to adopt my older brother, and then I came along, and then my younger brother, and they just didn't get around to India anymore, but they've always been a part of the Lord's church.
Well,
it's just been something very important to them.
Yeah, imagine all those trips and everything. Mm-hmm. You told me a little bit about being homeschooled.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Well, honestly, I think it had its good and its bad. Looking back on it now, I think it was more good than bad. But being back then, I kind of took it for granted sometimes. But being able to just do things a little bit more on my own schedule and take things at a pace that I learned best with was incredibly helpful.
Now, what it was like growing up, when did you decide you wanted to be a Christian, and how did you come to that decision? Because it's a little different when people say it's easy for you when you grow up in the church, but it's different. It's not necessarily easy, especially when your dad's a preacher, because you're like, yeah. What was it like to make the decision to become a Christian?
Well, there was never really any pressure from my parents. They taught me and my brothers, and then they taught us in a way that when we were ready to become a Christian, we were the ones that had to make that step. It wasn't something that they forced upon us. But I actually became a Christian when I was 12 years old. It was January 21st, 2010. I still remember that date. That's one of the few that I can remember down to the day. But I mean, it's just. I'm sure it is different, being raised a preacher's kid, but even after being baptized, there's still the same things that you think about as anyone else, wondering if you made the decision for the right reasons, things like that. But being that I have the parents that I have, I knew I could always go to them and discuss things, and they wouldn't just tell me their opinion, but they'd look through things with me and try to understand things with me, not just telling me how it is.
So you made that big decision, and then you decided to go to preaching school. Mm-hmm. What led you to that?
Well, honestly, it was just a desire to further my knowledge of God's Word. Just initially going into preaching school, I had talked to Andy Robison and Steve Harr as well, and I'd told them just plainly that I don't want to be a full-time minister. I want to further my knowledge of the Bible and then do some kind of part-time ministry maybe. They call it a tent-making preacher, like the Apostle Paul. Mm-hmm. But that's something that I said at the very beginning. But as time goes on, that's kind of changed. But I'd been working. Just like a lot of the other people that come to school, I'd been working jobs where I didn't feel like I was doing any good, and so I decided, I should just go and further my Bible knowledge and see if I can do something from that and do more for the Lord's church instead of just taking care of myself.
What kind of jobs did you have before you decided to go to preaching school?
Well, I worked at a factory called Beverage Air for a little while, putting refrigerators together, and then after that, for about a year, I worked at Walmart, and most of that time was in the sporting goods section as a sales associate.
It's definitely honorable work.
Yeah, it definitely tries your patience sometime at least.
The public has a way of doing that, but preaching does too.
Oh so, yeah, I'm catching on to that some, but There's a few similarities that I found just from watching my dad throughout growing up, and then having to work with people at Walmart, dealing with angry customers and people that think everything needs to be their way. And
sure. Well, they advertise it that way, don't they?
Yeah.
Burger King, have it your way, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
So I guess we get what we advertise. Why don't we let's talk a little bit about your preaching schedule.
Well, I went a few different places last year, but this year I'm going up to Clarion, Pennsylvania every other first Sunday. Then I'm going to Minksville every second Sunday, Warren, PA every third, and Crum Ridge every fourth. I actually grew up in the Warren area. My dad preached there for just over 12 years, and so being able to go back there and do some work for them up there, even if it's just on that one Sunday a month, it's nice to be able to go back up there and see people. And then over at Clarion, that's about the area where my dad's at now, and so I've got friends over there that I get to see. And then Minksville and Crum Ridge, I didn't know anybody there before starting in the school year, but the more I go out preaching, the more I realize how incredible the Lord's church is, just how welcoming and warm and friendly the church is. Just accepting people in like they've known them for years.
What did your parents think about when you decided to go into preaching? What did they think about that?
Well, I think my dad may have been a little bit surprised at first, because I'd never really said anything about it earlier on. But once I had called him on the phone, and whenever I would visit them, I talked to him about it some. And once I actually sat down and discussed it with him, he realized that this is something that he's seriously considering. Even if he doesn't become a full-time minister, just that desire to further the knowledge, that's something that he had done when he was younger as well, going to school to gain a better understanding of the Lord's word. And so, I think he was proud more than anything, to know that one of his children was doing something like that. And my brothers are going to Christian colleges as well, and they get the Bible education there, but it's not to the same extent as something like the West Virginia School of Preaching.
Now, how did you get to West Virginia? I mean, you're in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
I know Pennsylvania is not that far away from West Virginia, but how did you get to the West Virginia School of Preaching?
Well, actually, the first I heard about it was from the Har family. Steve Har, who's the works with the evangelism at the Hillview Terrace Church of Christ. I've been going to Pennsylvania Christian Camp with him and his family for years, and then when he decided that he was going to go to school at West Virginia School of Preaching, his daughter was one of the people that told me, you should just go ahead and go with him. But I was a few years younger at the time and didn't really think that something that I wanted to pursue. But ever since then, it was in the back of my mind as something that might actually be really good. And then as I got older and I kept seeing more value in it, that's what drew me closer. And I talked to Steve some more and talked to Andy. But I guess it all mostly started with Steve deciding to go there, with Steve Har.
Good. Now, and how did you find the West Virginia School of Preaching to be?
Well, everybody will tell you before you start that it's 4 years of school crammed into 2. You don't have time for work, you just have time for school. But you don't realize how serious they really are until you start, until you actually get in there and get into the workload. I was honestly a little bit surprised and shaken up in the first year, especially the earlier part. It all seems overwhelming at first.
Yeah, I want to read this quote. This is from Andy Robison, who made show it on the screen here. It says, one of Collin's greatest challenges his first year shows his noble character. He was worried that he was sitting too much and not active enough in the Lord's work. Collin has done well. He has grown in his speaking ability and is a very conscientious young man. He and his classmates get together to help one another in a way that is inspiring. Basically what he's saying is you had a hard time sitting still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a lot of sedentary element of preaching, sitting, because it's not just sitting around.
Right.
You're studying. That had to be a big adjustment to you.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the job that I had at Walmart, I was working that right up until I decided to go to school, and in doing that, I was running around all over the place all the time. There was pretty much the only time I was sitting down was when I was on a break, and then going into school, your mind is completely active all the time, but physically, you are doing a lot of sitting, so it's a difficult adjustment sometimes.
It's sort of an interesting dynamic how mentally active you'll be, but how your body's not, and it's an adjustment. Your body's going to feel it.
Oh yeah.
And you mentioned here about some of the things, some of your hobbies. I mean, that's not the right word, but something you wanted to get back to. And it seems like I read something to that. One of it was fitness.
Yeah. Well, when I was in high school, I did a lot of weightlifting with the football team and such, track and field as well. But that's just something that I really enjoyed, and at the same time, it was good for improving discipline and motivation. It's something that seemed to help me out a lot when I was in high school. So that's something I'd like to get back into. But again, being in school, there's a limited amount of time, and the free time you have, you don't really want to go to the gym.
Sure. Who would you consider your role model?
Well, honestly, I've talked about my dad some there at the beginning, but him and my mom both. But my dad has just been he's been an incredible role model. Just growing up and being able to look up to him and the work he does. He's told me on multiple occasions that he doesn't seek recognition from his work or anything like that, but he just wants to go somewhere where he feels like he can make a difference.
Now, you mentioned your father has gone to India a time or two. Is that something you think you might be interested someday, doing something like that? Or
I think there might come a time when I would have some interest for that, but I don't know what the future may hold for my life. And my dad's actually always talked about wanting to go back. So if there was any time later on down the road, even if it's quite a ways from now, even after I've maybe even gotten married, had kids, whatever comes, if it's Lord willing, maybe my dad and me would be able to make another trip over there, because I know he misses the people there.
I'm sure he would love that trip.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
You told me that you were involved in Civil Air Patrol. Now, when I was in high school, I had two friends of mine that were very involved in it. They really loved it. I wasn't, but they really enjoyed it. Why don't you tell them a little bit about Civil Air Patrol and what's it about, and how does it, what did you learn from it?
Well, that's something that my dad actually got me and my older brother into. We both joined when we were 12 years old. You can join as a cadet from the ages of 12 to, I believe it's 17 or 18, and me and my brother were both in it until we were right around that 17-year-old mark. But there's a lot of things to learn in that, and a lot of things that you deal with, things that you do that just help you with working with people. One of the big things that I did, since it was a smaller squadron, was a lot of community service stuff, like parking vehicles at county fairs and things like that. Just being in contact with people that just want to do what they're doing and not have to worry about anything else. And so it definitely teaches you some good qualities and teaches you a lot of motivation as well. For the last few years that I was in it, I was actually the flight sergeant from my squadron, and so I had to make sure that I was doing everything right, but then to keep an eye on everybody else that was in the flight that was under me, to make sure they were doing things the way they were supposed to too. And so it helped me kind of train my supervisory area, I guess, because it's not easy to keep an eye on everybody, but then when you're actually forced into a situation where you've got to keep an eye on people and see what's going on with people and be able to be observant, that's something where that really helped out.
Good. Obviously, you have a Bible background. I mean, even if you didn't know you were getting one, I'm sure with your father, you're going to learn. So you know a lot. You know quite a bit about the Bible before you went to school. What were some of the classes that you found that you really enjoyed at the school of preaching?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think both the first year and this second year, the classes that go throughout the whole year are going to be a couple of my favorite, even though they are some of the more difficult ones. You know, I'm with the first year with Jack Gilchrist in Hebrew history. You know, as the year progressed, he got to be a little bit more of a stickler for grammar and writing papers and things of that nature. But you know, he was just the way he presented things was easy to listen to and easy to learn from. And then with the second year, I know it's going to continuously get worse as the year goes on, and you know, I may want to give up on it here and there, but so far with Greek, you know, it's like a puzzle. My mom, when she was teaching me things like math, she'd say, "It's like a puzzle. That's why I like math. So look at it like a puzzle." But you know, it never worked for math. But
but it's going to work for Greek.
It works for Greek, though.
Okay.
It does.
Well, you have Aaron Birch as a real. He's a knowledgeable young man, and I'm sure he's a very effective teacher and very helpful with it. Let me ask you this: favorite book of the Bible, and why?
Well, I'd probably have to say the Book of James. You know, I'm always finding myself whenever I need some advice or I'm unsure about something, I'll find myself going to the Book of James and just trying to read a couple verses there, read chapter 2. You know, chapter 2 has a lot of verses in it that I look back to frequently. You know, but if I had to pick one book, I would pick the Book of James.
Now you also you led singing for chapel. I talked to you about this before, and I told you, very good song leader. Was leading singing something you already knew before you went to school, or was it something that, because I know you have a class in song leading, what was that like?
Well, right after I became a Christian when I was 12, my dad encouraged both me and my brother to jump right into doing things like leading prayers and doing song leading, serving on the Lord's table, things like that. But as much of a struggle as it was, the song leading is something that I always really enjoyed. You know, he tried to teach me the hand patterns and the key signatures and things like that when I first started, but you know, it didn't quite stick when I was at that younger age. You know, I just wanted to get up there and lead the song and not have to worry about making sure it was in the right key. But that's something where Andy's song leading class, the song leading class that Andy Robison teaches, that's where that's been really helpful, is because I can actually make sure I'm starting songs in the right key on the right note. But you know, just music and song leading is something that I've always enjoyed.
All right. Obviously, you know, it's a 2-year program. It's intense. You know, 4 years, you know, into 2 basically. And I can imagine it can get really challenging, stressful. Might even bit, you know, at times discouraging. What kind of sources of encouragement have you found at the school?
Well, honestly, every single one of the teachers are probably one of the best sources of encouragement, and the past graduates as well. You know, I know a few of the people that have graduated, especially Steve, who's of course still at the school and working there, but also George Murphy and Andrew Beasley, people like that, and then Fred Goddard comes around every once in a while. And you know, I was encouraged to talk to him even before coming to school. You know, but you know, the graduates of the school, as well as all the teachers, are the best motivation that you can get there. You know, they will do anything they can to help you get through it more smoothly and get through it better and be able to learn and retain as much as you can and just keep giving you that motivation to keep going.
Very good. This is an interesting question to me. I like to ask. It'll be interesting to hear what you say about this one, because you observed your father preach, and you've gone to preaching school. Was there anything about the ministry that you just, I don't want to say that your dad hid anything from you or anything like that, but when you went to preaching school, you were like, wow, I really didn't know it was going to be so much of this. Was there any surprises to you, or anything that, you know, that you learned at school that you didn't really understand as much until now you know it better than you did before you started school?
Well, I mean, one of the big things is just the depth that needs to go into things like sermon preparation. You know, and growing up, even in the church, you know, a lot of the studies that I did, it was more shallow studies. You know, we'd have some some memory work here and there, but then it was almost just scratching the surface, digging into books now. But just, you know, the things that were more behind the scenes, just dealing with people, you know, is stuff that my dad kind of kept back a little bit growing up. You know, he kept that to himself mostly and just handled it himself. You know, he didn't want us getting involved or getting worried with things like that. You know, and as I got older, I could understand why. You know, it's a lot to deal with, especially talking to people at school that have been preachers for years and years. You know, coming in and studying to be a minister of the gospel, studying to be a preacher. You know, they're more open with you as to the kind of things that they've had to deal with. You know,
it's not all glamorous, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
There's, you know, people. I mean, people are broken.
Mm-hmm.
They're broken.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in the sin business. You're the healing business. I mean, that's what you're trying to do. And some people are really damaged.
Yeah.
And I imagine that your father was being a father, protecting you from that kind of stuff, because
most definitely.
You know, it could really, because some people's lives are just it's, you know, sometimes they'll come to you with such a mess, and and they'll ask you, what can I do to fix this? And I'm like, wow, you know, I think you just need to make sure you get your relationship right with God first, and then start working at these things. But, you know, I can remember one person came and talked to me, and they did that. They're like, you know, I said, my husband, he doesn't like me, we're divorced, and my kids all hate me, and all that. And they, all this, you know, and, you know, she went to prison, and she said, but I became a Christian, and I started, you know, doing these things, and you know what, my husband, you know, he still hates me, and my children, they still don't talk to me, and I just don't get it, and I'm like, well, you know, there are still consequences. And sometimes those are a long time to figure out and to work through, and some things cannot be undone like that. What would you say to somebody that's thinking about being a preacher? What would you recommend to them?
Well, I mean, probably one of the best things you can do is to come to some kind of preaching school. You know, you can of course be a minister of the gospel and do the study on your own, but being able to be in a setting where everything is centered around that, like being at the West Virginia School of Preaching, and I'm sure other preacher schools as well. You know, it's just it's an environment that you can't get anywhere else. You know, I even went over to Ohio Valley University for a very short time, and you know, I was able to observe the biblical students there. You know, the ones that were seeking to be preachers going through Ohio Valley University. But it's not the same. It's not the same kind of setting. It's not the same kind of environment.
It's a lot more intense in the school of preaching. A lot of people don't. A lot of people think that some people think going to preaching school is easy, and going to college is hard. And I'm like, no. It's very intensive studying. What are some things you enjoy preaching about?
You know, honestly, I haven't done a whole lot of topics of my own choice going through school. You know, I didn't do really any preaching at all before coming into school. You know, I hadn't even really done a Devo. You know, I stuck with the song leading and prayers and things like that. But after getting into school, you know, it's a lot of sermons where you write about what you're covering in class. Like for example, this quarter that I'm in right now, we're studying through the minor prophets, and we're to write a sermon for each minor prophet book. So
you're converting your material to lessons. That's
exactly.
Great. Exactly. Well, Collin, best of luck on your graduation. It's great to have you here, and thanks for being on the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for watching our program. Before we close our program today, we'd like to take a moment and review this roadmap to heaven with you, since the matter is so serious. There are many incorrect set of directions out there, and sadly, so many people are following them. For example, some people have been given wrong turns. They believe things such as faith only, works only, or grace only. Or some attempt to change the order of the turns, being baptized before they even believe. Some people fail to realize what point they are on the map. Don't even open their Bibles yet, and they think they're saved already. As a person travels in a car or takes a hike, has to follow the proper directions, so we must follow the proper directions to heaven. Let's take a look at the directions on our roadmap to heaven here. You have to look at these passages in your Bible for yourself. We'll just list the steps, the turns on the way. First is to believe or to have faith. And then number 2, to repent, to turn away from sin. Number 3 is to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Number 4 is immersion, or to be baptized, which is a burial in water to have your sins washed away. And then you're added to the church by the Lord, not by a group of people, or not by giving some kind of testimonial experience or things like that. And then once you're added, you need to serve and worship the Lord faithfully all the days of your life. And the key word's faithfully. You don't waver. And that's very important. We need to keep in mind, too, that in Noah's day there was a big flood, and only people in the ark were saved from the flood. The same is true today. There is no salvation outside the Lord's church. Where are you on the roadmap to heaven? Thanks for watching our program. Please let us know if we can assist you with further information for your journey.